Welcome to Going Down the Line. I'm Steven from Virginia. That's Chase Gilmer. And we're still disappointed about the Auburn game.
Yes, we definitely are, but that's besides the point right now.
Ugh. Baylor lost to Auburn 38 to 24 in devastating fashion on national television on Friday night. And I guess that's where we have to start, right?
Yes, it is. And um, look, the fact of the matter is, there was so much with the game on Friday that we just didn't do well at. I think there were a couple bright sides to the game, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing that really prevented us from winning this game was our run defense as well as special teams. I mean, we couldn't even stop Jackson freaking Arnold, for crying out loud. And it's it's the fact that, we didn't put spies on him. We didn't adjust. So how are you going to stop the run, especially against the quarterback, when you don't adjust? That's that was the most disappointing aspect. And there was no defensive play that was worse than that 4th and 1 down play at the very end of the game, where we knew that it was going to be a quarterback draw. We didn't put a spy on him, and look what happened. He walks all the way in for a touchdown to pretty much ice the game at that point.
Well, and I also thought to talk about the 4th and 1 play for a second. I also thought a lot of the night we had linebackers and defensive players overcommitting and overrunning their assignments. And I don't know, you had a pretty good view too. We were both at the game, but I felt our linebackers bit way too early on that to try and protect the outside, and that was really frustrating because I felt like that happened a number of times throughout the night where we overran and couldn't run down Jackson Arnold because of it, and just really disappointing. I feel like you could very simply say that if you don't stop the run and if you don't run the ball effectively, you're not going to win many football games. And that's what happened to Baylor. And it was especially disheartening for me that, Baylor scored to bring it within 7 at the end of the third quarter, or what looked like it was going to be the end of the third quarter. And then Auburn runs back a kickoff for a touchdown. And I just think that that was really difficult because the momentum had been lost early in the game when we were down 17-3, and we had clawed our way back in it, and to then let them run a kickoff back, really disappointing. And I have to be honest, the whole thing has been really disappointing for me, especially considering the defense and the special teams really let us down in this game, and the punting wasn't that great. I know Palmer Williams is an All-American candidate punter, but he did not punt very well the 2 or 3 times he punted.
He looks really rusty.
Looked really rusty for sure, and um, I just have to look at Coach Aranda and Coach Powledge because both of those guys are defensive and special teams gurus, and we really just didn't look like we were prepared to tackle anybody, and that was really a struggle.
Yeah, it certainly was. And on top of that, it also looked like Sawyer Robertson was, not 100% because he had that injury going into the offseason and everything like that. He looked basically like a statue. Now, having said that, he still looked okay, at least passing wise. He it he was still pretty inaccurate, for sure. But I mean, still, the fact that he still put up over 400 passing yards despite all the shortcomings that happened on offense, I mean, it says a lot about his leadership and a lot about the kind of player that he is. Now, I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman at all, but I mean, he led almost or no, he did lead everyone in week 1 in passing yards, 419 passing yards. And on top of that, man, that our wide receiving core actually might be a lot better than we thought, especially with how big Cole Wilson was in Friday's game. I mean, he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was the only one that put over 100 yards or receiving. In fact, I think he was close to 150 if I'm not mistaken. But Trigg was still really good. I mean, there were a couple plays where if Sawyer was a little bit more accurate, or if Trigg didn't tip the pass, then maybe he has more receiving yards, and he might have an extra touchdown to go along with that. Kobe Prentice was awesome. He had that big fourth down touchdown play. Um, Louis Brown was also good, and we can't forget about Josh Cameron and Ashton Hawkins. I mean, those are still they still had pretty good games, even though on the stat sheet it's not going to show up that way. So I don't think, or like, yes, losing is bad, but it's not like everything was bad. And we can also talk about, if we're going to go that route, the secondary actually was decent. Now, I know um, that Jackson Arnold didn't throw as much as we thought, but in the limited attempts where they were trying to pass, our secondaries actually looked decent.
Yeah, to start with the wide receivers had over 200 yards of yards after the catch, and that's just incredible. Sawyer, even though he completed just a little over 50% of his passes, throwing for 400 yards is amazing. Trigg had 7 catches for 99 yards, which was huge. He was a matchup nightmare for Auburn all night long. And even though he dropped a couple of touchdowns or could be touchdowns, I really was impressed by Trigg. Um, the secondary played pretty well, but I do think that Auburn realized very early in this game that we were not going to be able to stop the run, so there was no point in throwing the football. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is Jackie Marshall went out early. We didn't have Carl Williams, of course. Uh, but I don't really want to make excuses because we should have been able to tackle better and we should have made some plays. It really felt like, as I was sitting there watching, that every time the Auburn Tigers ran the ball up the middle, we just weren't going to be able to stop them. And that's a serious problem. And especially when you have a defensive minded head coach who handpicked his defensive coordinator, who doesn't call plays but is still technically the defensive coordinator. I'm very disappointed in a lot of ways in the defense, and I know Coach Aranda is too. But man, that was just not a great effort from the Bears.
Right. And speaking of, of all that, I've seen a lot of people overreacting about this game, but before I go into that, I'll give those people who have been saying what they've been saying this. It is year 6 of defensive-minded coach Dave Aranda being the head coach at Baylor. It's been 4 years since we won the Big 12 championship, which I would argue that was probably the best Baylor's ever played in a season was 2021 when they won the Big 12 title. The fact that we're 4 years past that, and it feels like things are just getting worse and worse and worse on the defensive side, especially when it comes to the rush defense. It's like it's like what are we doing? And we've made so many changes since that season. I mean, we've gone through 2 different defensive coordinators. We've gone through 3 different people calling the plays, if you want to include Dave Aranda. We've gone through personnel changes. We've gone through player changes. But it's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that's what's absolutely frustrating about how things have been on the defensive side. Having said that, though, because I've seen a lot of people say some things where I'm just like, what are we doing? Like, I've seen people say that Aranda's job should be on the line. And to that, I say, why? I mean, come on, guys. We're 1 game into the season. things can change very, very quick. And to say that after the first game of the season is just so unnecessary. Now, granted, if we lose to SMU this week, then maybe, yeah, maybe we should probably start talking about, Aranda's seat starting to get warm a little bit. But we're not at that point yet. So let's cut it right there. And then the other thing I do want to say, because there was some other people saying that Mac Rhodes is not going to fire him, even if we go 3-9 again. And I think to that I say, do you know him? Because I think Mac Rhodes knows better than anyone else that if we go 3-9, or heck, even if we go 6-6 this year, given the expectations that we're going into the season, which I think you and I can agree, maybe we should have lowered them just a tiny bit. Um, Even if we go 6-6, I think Mac Rhodes would have that hard conversation, and like maybe we would need to go through a head coaching change at that point, but we're not at that point yet. So let's cut the crap and just stop overreacting after the first game of the season.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with both sentiments. I would say that I'm very worried that we're staring a 1-3 start down the barrel. But I would also say that the back half of the schedule, like last year, gets a lot easier. Um, so it's possible for Baylor to make a kind of turnaround like they did last year. They have a lot of the same players from last year's team. There's a lot of guys who are experienced and will not let an early bad start shake them. But yeah, 1-3 start is not out of the question. We'll talk a little bit more about SMU, but SMU has a running quarterback too. And after the way Baylor just played a running quarterback, very worried about facing one directly after while Baylor's trying to lick their wounds. And also, Arizona State is is a Big 12 title contender. And so that's another big game. I know some of the other parts of the schedule have kind of eased up, but I would say that anything less than 8-4 or 7-5 is really going to feel like a disappointment. And in a lot of ways, I do feel like Dave Aranda will have to answer some tough questions if we're 7-5 or under.
Yeah.
I saw someone on Twitter say, "What exactly do you do here, bro?" to Dave Aranda, like not tagging him or anything, but and I think that's a little overblown, but I do feel some of that frustration because we didn't tackle well, we didn't fill our gaps well, and we didn't stop the run at all. And it's very frustrating to see that. And I think what really took the wind out of the sails is going for it on fourth down very early in the game in the goal on the goal line pretty much and not getting it.
Well,
And
that was
then
also
Auburn
set up
takes
by
it
the
all
fact.
the way down the field to score, right?
Right.
That
Well,
took the wind out of our sails.
it was also set up on the fact that, the first, second, and third and goal plays, um, those were not good play calls by Jake Spavital at the time. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with going for it on fourth down. Me personally, I probably would have taken the 3 points, but I can understand why Spavital decided to go for it on fourth down at the time, because if you get the touchdown there, you're basically having Auburn in a chokehold at that point. It just didn't work out that way because the play calls the 3 plays prior, or the previous 3 plays prior, were just not good, in my opinion.
Well, and here's what I'll say about that, both points you make. First, I think they thought they were going to run the ball more effectively, and they called like 3 Bryson Washington runs up the gut pretty much in the first 3 plays of that sequence. And they got stuffed or not enough gain on all 3 of them. And then the second is I actually don't mind going for it on fourth down in that situation. I think
Yeah.
I was kind of for it because at that moment, what we had seen at Auburn, we had stopped Auburn on their first drive, and Jackson Arnold did not look comfortable at all. So I think Dave was thinking, well, they haven't looked very comfortable. Jackson's not throwing the ball well. If they're going to have to drive the length of the field to beat us, and they did. And that was really tough to swallow, and I think it took a lot of momentum out of the Bears' sails.
If I'm not mistaken, Jackie Marshall also went out of the game during the second defensive drive.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously didn't help either. Um, can we also talk about, and I'm not saying this is why we lost, but can we also just talk about how bad the refs were in
Oh, I would love
crucial
to.
moments? And look, again, I'm not saying they're the reason why we lost, because the refs are not the reason why we couldn't stop the run, and the refs are not the reason why our special teams was just so bad. So I'm not saying that. But in very crucial moments, oh my God. And if you watch the game, you know 3 exact moments that I'm talking about. And those are the non-face mask call against that where the defender basically ripped Ashton Hawkins' helmet off. The weak holding call against Matthew Kloffenstein that brought back what would have been a 50-yard rushing play for Bryson Washington. That
Mm-hmm.
was the start of the fourth quarter. And then the one that I think was the most egregious of all, the phantom defensive holding against us that would have set up a 4th and short deep in Auburn's territory.
Mm-hmm.
That was the backbreaker to me. That also set up that 4th down play for Jackson Arnold. But again, I'm not saying that they're the reason we lost, but those
It
types
didn't
of
help.
calls, yeah, I was gonna say those type of calls don't help.
Right.
And I actually didn't know this until later into the game. Those are SEC refs. So it's like,
Well, and the SEC ref thing to me just shows how bad the officials in the SEC are, because I think we spend a good amount of the season every year complaining about Big 12 refs. And I don't know if I've seen a Big 12 crew whiff on 3 calls like that were so obvious and were so bad the other way. I mean, and part of me, like you said, the refs aren't to blame for losing, but it certainly didn't help at all
yeah, I if anything, someone should be suspended for the no call for that
on
face mask.
Ashton Hawkins.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that was,
that's about as blatant of a call.
and you got someone right there looking at it. It's like, come on.
And I do think that they called a pass interference later in the drive that was a give back,
Yeah, it was.
but at that point the damage is done. It's too late, and like, thank you for giving us back a call, but it was such an egregious call, and like
Yeah.
so obvious that like someone's helmet doesn't come off like that unless you're really ripping at the face mask. And I was really disappointed. But uh the last thing I guess I'll say about Auburn before I'm ready to move on to SMU, I don't know if there's anything that you want, is the fans brought the energy. The atmosphere was electric. The blackout and the gold chrome helmets did what they needed to do in terms of getting fans excited and riled up for the game. It was just a dud. And going down 17-3 early really hurt. And I know the vibes were low in the stands. But as we came back and clawed our way back into the game, it felt like we were going to have an opportunity to come back until the kick return touchdown. I'm not going
Yeah.
to lie. The kick return touchdown, really disappointing. And I was really disappointed in special teams today. Like I said earlier, um, just really disappointing effort from, two and a half thirds of the ball. I don't think we ran the ball well. I don't think we played well on defense. I don't think we played well on special teams. And the fact that we only lost the game by 14 when we pretty much, didn't do much well at all, and our quarterback only threw over 50%, it really was a valiant effort. And I guess the last thing I would say about Auburn is that I'm not very confident about going there to play them next year.
Yeah, we'll see about that. One last thing I will say, because you brought it up with the slow start. This is the exact same thing that Baylor did in the first half of last year. And it's just like if it's gonna happen again, it's like that's very concerning. Now, granted, I know Auburn's a good team, and you and I have agreed that Auburn's going to be a lot better this year than we're last. So I'm not disappointed that we lost to Auburn because of that. But it's just like the slow starts, the the lack of effort on defense, especially when it comes to rushing. We can't continue to do that.
Hmm.
It's just not acceptable at this point. Especially like we said, this is year 6 of Dave Aranda. We can't be doing this on defense.
Well, and the year 6 of Dave Aranda's thing comes down to when you fire everybody around you, eventually there's nobody left to blame but you.
Yes, exactly.
And that's happened a lot. And I would say, whereas we both kind of talked about an 10 win team to when we were doing our predictions last week, man, I'm seeing a ceiling of 8-4. I don't think they're going to beat SMU the way that we thought they were. I don't know if they're going to beat Arizona State. And Utah looked really good against UCLA. So that's 4 losses, off the jump there. And that means you're going to have to win every single other game, convincingly, or, to be back where you were last year. And I really don't think the fan base is going to accept 7-5 or 6-6, even if we did play one of the harder schedules in the country with 11 Power 5 teams. I just don't think that's going to be acceptable.
If it helps, aside from those teams that you just listed, it feels like the rest of the Big 12 isn't as good as we thought. Now,
Mm-hmm.
granted, if we start the season like, and I'm just speaking hypothetically here, if we start the season 1-5, then at that point, Dave Aranda does need to be gone. Like at that point, not after the season, at that point. But until then, I'm not necessarily going to be worried. Spoiler, I do have Baylor bouncing back against SMU, but maybe not as I thought it would be. But just looking at, we could definitely go into the SMU game now because of
Okay.
that. I am looking at the stats of their game against East Texas A&M, which a lot of people probably remember them as Texas A&M Commerce. They just changed their name this year to East Texas A&M. Um, there's not really much that like is eye popping to me about SMU from their game. Now they did have 2 pick sixes. That's pretty good. But the 42-13 score is not as lopsided as the result says because looking at, their offensive stats, Kevin Jennings only had 260 passing yards on 30 passes, had 1 interception, 2 touchdowns. Rushing wise, they had 140 yards, and you talked about how Kevin Jennings is a mobile quarterback, which he is. I'm not disagreeing with that, but he only had 12 yards rushing against an FCS school. So that's a little bit eye opening to me. Now, granted, things might be different when we play them because of how we fared against the run against the quarterback last week, but still, that's something that should be said. Receiving wise, I mean, it goes hand in hand with the quarterback's passing, but it again, it's SMU's still good. I just don't know how good they are, is what I'm saying.
I certainly see this game as a shootout. I don't think either team will be able to stop the other.
Yeah,
I don't think Baylor will be able to stop SMU on the ground. I don't think if SMU was smart, I don't think they would pass a lot in this game until Baylor proved to them that they could stop them on the ground. And
yeah,
I think Baylor's receivers and their passing game was so good against Auburn, even though it wasn't at its best, that they'll be able to hold their own and keep the scoring up against SMU. I think it's gonna come down to one or two key stops, which is gonna be like an old school Big 12 game, where maybe it's in the 40s or the 50s, and one key turnover or one key third down and fourth down stop makes the difference. I'm not, I'm not really confident in either team to come out and beat the other. I am worried about our ability to stop the run and our ability to stop Kevin Jennings because we could not stop Jackson Arnold for anything, no matter how hard we tried. And I feel like at times we tried too hard because we were overshooting our gaps and missing assignments and just very undisciplined with our tackles. It felt like Jackson Arnold, slipped through a bunch of tackles. And if that happens again Sunday or Saturday, excuse me, then we're going to be in a world of trouble and we're going to have to score every time we touch the ball.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I do think, SMU might pass more than we think, only because, well, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't really get a lot of attempts to even defend the pass. And I don't necessarily think there's going to be a lot of film for SMU to go on when it comes to that. So I think they might pass more than we think, but I do agree they're going to run more than they pass.
Oh, for sure. And I guess where I come from on that opinion is if you just saw Auburn run for 300 yards against us, why would you pass?
Yeah, no, that's a
Why
good point.
like, why Auburn ran through us, like foreign water through a tourist. Like, it's just terrible. And, it comes down to if you're SMU and you just watch Jackson Arnold just absolutely destroy us on the ground for over 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, why would you, with Kevin Jennings, drop back to have him pass?
Yeah, no,
And,
that's a good point.
I would say that I heard Dave Aranda's press conference today on my break at work, and Dave Aranda was saying that Carl Williams was back with them at practice today, so I'm hoping that he will play and that will help us a lot, especially in our pass secondary. But at the same time, if SMU can run all over us at 6 yards a carry, which is essentially what Auburn got, I'm not really sure if there's a reason for them to pass more than the 17 or 18 times that Jackson Arnold passed.
We need Jackie Marshall back badly. That's
Yeah.
for sure. I don't think he's going to be playing, but
Well, and I do want to say this about that. Um, I understand Jackie Marshall's a single digit. I understand he's an all conference type of player. But after all the transfers we took and after all the improvements that were made on the defensive side of the ball during the second half of the season last year, I did not feel that losing one player should make that large of an impact. And I mean, we overshot gaps. I've said that before. We missed tackles. I've said that before. And at the end of the day, those things have to be fixed regardless of who's playing on the defensive line. And I was just really disappointed in our defensive effort. So I'm not decided yet. I mean, maybe the more we talk in the show, by the time we get to picks, I'll have a pick. But I'm really afraid of this SMU game this weekend. It's going to be on the CW. So we'll see who outside of Baylor and SMU Nation really watches it. But I'm really worried that this is about to be a really bad start to the year. And the fan base has been toxic over the times in the past 2.5 seasons, maybe even 3 seasons, really. And I'd hate to go down to that place again.
yeah, I mean, again, I understand the concerns, especially on defense, but I'm I'm just not going to overreact to one game, especially since things could change very quick. Um, excuse me. Now, granted, there is still path to the college football playoffs for Baylor, but at this point, I'm not even worried about that. I just want to get to 8 wins.
Right. And I'm kind of, as I walked out of the stadium, I thought to myself, we could still win the Big 12. And if we win the Big 12, we make the playoff and have all the good graces and all the things we wish for at the beginning of the season. The season's still ahead of us.
Yeah,
We've still got a lot of games ahead of us, but it's not hard to be disappointed, and it's not hard to look at an SMU team ahead and be like, well, that team made the playoff last year, and Auburn was what, 6-7 last year.
5-7.
So 5-7 and 6-7 the year before. So it's really it's hard for me not to be disappointed. Um, is there anything? How much more do we want to go on this SMU game?
No, I mean, I've said everything that I wanted to say about SMU. I mean, really, it all really comes down to whose defense plays better, whose offense, is able to, run better, essentially. And I mean, I feel like I'm saying the obvious here because, well, you know, Baylor just didn't run the ball all that well last week. SMU, even though they did put up over 140 yards rushing, I mean, it was against an FCS school, so you would think that they would do much better than that. But so I really just think it's who's able to run the ball better, who's able to stop the run better, and then I do agree it's going to be a shootout, but whether or not who wins, that remains to be seen.
Yeah. All right. So is it time to do some picks of the week?
It is.
All right. Do you want to read off the picks one by one, Chase, and we'll pick the games?
Yes. So the first game that we're going to be picking is good old Iowa at Iowa State. Um, Iowa State is obviously 2-0. Games at 11 a.m. Central Time on Fox. Steven, who do you have winning this game?
Give me Iowa State. Iowa State has looked really good this year. I've been really impressed with them. They are a Big 12 contender for the championship for sure, and I'd love to see them win this game against Iowa. Give me Iowa State.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Clones as well. Um, I'll be honest, I haven't really seen Iowa's game from week 1 already, but given what I've seen from Iowa State so far, which by the way, did you see that their kick had a
63-yarder. Yeah, I saw
yard
that. That's
field
crazy.
goal? That's impressive. So, with that all being said, um, Iowa State's offense and defense is really good. I'm going with the Clones. So our next one is going to be another classic. It's going to be Kansas at Missouri, the border war. I'm going to go first on this one, and I'm actually going to pick the upset here because Missouri is favored by 6.5 points, which, by the way, it's at 2:30 p.m. on ESPN2. I'm picking Kansas in this one, uh, just solely based on the fact that Kansas has looked lights out so far this season. I mean, they looked really good against Fresno State, and then again in their last game against Wagner, they won 46-7. I think Jalen Daniels is going to help this team bounce back after a not pretty disappointing, a really disappointing 2024 campaign. So give me the Jayhawks.
Yeah, I saw that Missouri's quarterback got hurt in their first game,
So that's
and
also a good point.
that's a big loss for them. I know they were really excited about Sam Horn. Yeah, give me Kansas too. Give me Kansas. I like Jalen Daniels a lot. Um, this should be a shootout as well. Yeah, give me Kansas.
All right. So the next game that we're going to pick is Michigan at Oklahoma, and that is at 6:30 p.m. Central on ABC. Oklahoma is favored by 2.5 points. Steven, who do you have?
Um, this is tough. I think I'm probably going to go Oklahoma based on them being at home. Um, I've seen a lot of scuttlebutt around Bryce Underwood, the Michigan quarterback, but I'm just not ready to pick a freshman to go into Oklahoma, into Boomer Sooner country, and upset the Oklahoma Sooners. Give me Oklahoma.
I was actually about to pick Michigan, but the more I think about it, looking at the results and everything like that, the more I'm leaning towards picking OU in this one, just solely based off, results, stats, everything. And by the way, Michigan didn't really look good even with Bryce Underwood at quarterback in their game against New Mexico, they only won 34-17, which I mean, I guess doesn't really tell the whole story. But at the same time, if they're only winning by what was it, 17 points against a Group of Five school at home, how do you expect to beat a ranked team on the road? So I'm going to go with Oklahoma in this one. I think Michigan will keep it close, but I think Oklahoma is going to win in the end.
All right.
All right, so the next one, uh, I'm sorry, I'd actually drawn a blank on what on the games I was
USF in
thinking.
Florida.
That's right. Okay, USF in Florida. So this one is actually going to be a fun game, just based solely on the result for USF because after Boise State's opening touchdown, they put up what like 31 unanswered points to win and upset Boise State, which was their first win against a ranked team. I think they said in over a decade, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, however, with this game being in Florida and they looked really good this past week, I'm picking the Gators in this one. I do think USF's going to keep it close, but I think Florida is going to pull away in the fourth quarter.
I like Florida a lot. DJ Lagway is a really good quarterback. But give me USF. Give me USF for the plot, for they're hot. They beat a really good or what we thought would be a good Boise State team. Give me USF. Give me the Bulls.
All right. And just by the way, that game's at 3:15 Central at SEC Network. Now, there's one rapid fire prediction I do want us to make real quick before we do the Baylor SMU one, and that's going to be Arizona State, Mississippi State. I'm
Ooh.
going I'm going with Arizona State in that one. And I don't think it's going to be close.
This would be a really devastating game for the Big 12 to lose. Uh, but our buddy Blake Shapen is the quarterback at Mississippi State. Still, give me Arizona State. Give me
Yeah,
Arizona State. I know it's at Mississippi State, right?
yes, it is.
Yeah, but give me Arizona State, and I think if Arizona State does lose this football game, then we have a lot to talk about going into that Arizona State Baylor game.
Yeah. Also, it's just that aspect that Mississippi State is still kind of rebuilding. So I'm going with Arizona State in this one.
Okay.
All right, so down to our final game, which it's Baylor going on the road at SMU Saturday, no, or it's not November, September 6th at 11 a.m. Central on the CW Network, home of the ACC football. Steven, do you have Baylor bouncing back?
I have this being a high scoring game in the 40s. I'm ready to get hurt again. Give me Baylor. Give me Baylor like 45-42 in a shootout.
Okay, yeah. I've already alluded to it. I do have Baylor bouncing back in this one, but it really all depends on how well they do against the run. I think, passing wise, yeah, I mean, they're gonna get more pass attempts than they did against Auburn, but I do think that if they can stop the run, then I think things will, be better. But I do think it's gonna end up in a shootout with Baylor winning. And I do think if it does turn into a shootout, then that favors Baylor just a little bit more because their offense is really good. So yeah, give me Baylor in this one. I'm gonna go with final score 49-42 in this one.
I like that. I really want Baylor to get Bryson Washington going, and that's going to be a big determining factor in who wins this game.
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of another episode, so we're going to say sick 'em Bears and later, guys.
All right, Sick and Bears. See y'all next week.
Later, guys.